All right, everybody, gang, thank you so much for coming to the second mystery school, the first of 6 weeks. And, it's great. There's not a lot of people on, but, you're from all different parts of the world, really. So that's just so cool. I love how that works out. And I just want to say a little bit about why I do this and how this came about, because, the way it came about is so much the way Sid often spoke to us about just kind of see what comes to you, right? Like, don't be out there looking and trying to make things happen. And years ago, when I first met Sid in 1985 in Florida, I didn't get that right away. I didn't understand what he meant by that, because I was so excited about how much I had gotten. And believe me, that was nothing compared to what I see now. It was, and even now I know it's just the tip of the iceberg of the depth of what's possible to really see what Sid was trying to share with us. Not trying to, he shared with us, but what we were trying to understand. And so I was kind of minding my own business. I knew I did want to do an online course because I gave up my office where I was having a therapy practice, and I am just as busy online from my home. It's been a pleasure. I mean, I'm not happy about the fact that it was a pandemic that made that happen. A lot of people are in really tough shape if they're still alive. So I'm not happy about that, but it's just amazing how life evolves on its own. It really has been, for me, like being in this flow, this river of life that just brings you to the next place and the next place and the next place. And you cannot figure it out with the mind. I came of age, you might say, this age, with hearing about setting goals and a lot of in your head calculating and figuring out what's the next step and worrying and pondering. And so through the years, I have seen more and more and more that the more I open myself up to whatever is the next thing to do, it's like something is downloaded and I have to do it. I want to do it. It's a joy. It has its moments of difficulty, like my inability to, or I shouldn't say inability because I'm figuring it out, but the difficulties I did have with IT and technical stuff and, lawnmowers and leaf blowers going off at the wrong time. But it all seems to somehow work out. I don't know how, but it does. And, that's how The Secret of Love, Anne was talking earlier about one of the first books she ran across. And that's how that happened. It's as though something gets downloaded, it gets dropped in your lap, like this is the next thing to do. When I am not in the worry mode, when I'm not concerned about what the next thing is going to be. So that's one reason I do this. And, the fact that it just unfolded. And the other reason I do this, the bigger reason, is because I have seen through all these years with all the people I've worked with in my counseling practice, those clients who take me up on my suggestion to read or listen to Sid do exponentially better. And I thought, there's got to be a way to research this because I see it and I cannot convince other people of it. They've got to see it themselves, or they even have to experience it themselves to know what I'm talking about. And When I first read Second Chance back in 1985, I think I read it cover to cover in maybe 2 sittings. It didn't mean a lot to me. Back then, I thought, well, this is an interesting book. This is a fun read. And honestly, I thought those profound tidbits spoken by Richard and Mama Leela was kind of, like you go to a movie and The Matrix, that kind of a movie. And I thought, boy, how did Sid get such an imagination? And then through the years, I saw that it was not his imagination, it was what he saw. He really actually saw those things that Mama Leela and Richard talk about. And Jonathan talk about explaining to Richard. Richard is the character who's upset and in trouble in his mind. And I did not read that book for a second time, even though I heard Dr. Pettit say numerous times, read Second Chance as often as you can. And he would tell his story about how the second time he read Second Chance, he asked Sid, when did you rewrite this book? Some of you have heard that, right? And Sid just laughed because not one word had been rewritten, but Bill's level of consciousness rose to a place where he could catch what he didn't catch in the first reading. And I heard that so many times. I heard Bill say that, tell that story on many webinars, many occasions. It took until the beginning of the pandemic in March when I was on his Mind, Brain, Body, Behavior Connection online course. And that was required reading, Second Chance. So I read it. And guess what happened to me? This is a new edition. I'm sure that this was not in the book that I read in 1985. And I read it a third time since then in preparation for mystery school. But that's really how this evolved, because my mission, if I ever had one, is, aside from peace, love, and rock and roll, peace, love, and compassion and understanding, to spread that, which is what Sid saw so deeply, so incredibly. But it's also to get people reading and listening to the person who started this ripple going out throughout the world. Like we were talking before the recording started about how many people's lives have been affected by 6 of Sid's books and by his recordings that luckily we have today. You don't have to travel to Hawaii or Long Beach, California, or San Jose, or the other places that Sid spoke. Actually moved to Miami to be in the first school that was offered in Coral Gables. And a bunch of people moved from Oregon. Roger Mills was one of those people. When people see the value that is here, it's really easy to give up a half an hour of worrying and fretting and arguing with their spouse to go and read Sid. Because that's really what my clients had to give up. I would say to them, well, how much is a half an hour worth to you? What are you going to be missing out on? And when they really dug deep, they realized the things they'd be missing out on were things that were good to be missing out on. Like arguments, et cetera, fretting, worrying. So I want this to be a place where you can ask questions, share what you're seeing. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about, I have the 6 weeks divided, and the last 6 weeks we veered around those topics. But I do like to start out anyway, even if, the flow of life brings us elsewhere. But I do like to start out with the first topic listed, which is getting quiet and listening, the art of listening and getting quiet. Because, if you could get yourself quieted down, I'm reminded of this every time I take a yoga class. The teachers are always so good to spend really quite a bit of time getting people settled and in the moment. They might say things like, you might have little kids running around. You might have had a really busy day. You might have a lot on your mind. Right now, you can just, whenever you want that opportunity to feel better, it's about getting quiet, turning off that mumble jumble that goes on 24/7 in our brain. All the conditioned thoughts that we've taken on, that we've learned through the years to think, all the habitual ways of thinking, all the, we do a lot of comparisons, not just comparing ourselves to others, but comparing what we're hearing. Like, I remember first coming into listening to Sid, and many of us would say, oh, yeah, I know, that reminds me of Buddhism, or that reminds me of Zen, or that reminds me of, well, you want to let those thoughts go. Just let them go on their merry way, so you don't have to pay heed to it, because that is the contamination that Sid talks about. He went in or writes about in Second Chance, for one of the places where he says, in order to hear, all capital letters, hearing, seeing, all capital letters, it's within yourself. You're looking for a new thinking, new ways of seeing things. So having an open mind to see something fresh for yourself, that's where insights happen, and that's where change occurs. And talk about change from the first group. This is why I'm having, some of you, I know Richard knows, Tom Kelly, who's researched a lot of Three Principles programs. He's at Wayne State University. And he sent me the 2 surveys, which I think are wonderful. We just had the first group, and also a small group, complete the post-test. I don't want to get too affected by it, because first of all, I want Tom, to see the raw data, and he wants me to collect 20 people before he starts looking at the data. But just glancing, and the only reason I glanced was because I had to see if it got filled out, take a little peek. And then I took another little peek because it was amazing. The difference in 6 weeks, spending a half an hour. I mean, a lot of people did spend more than that, because you kind of get hooked in. There's no limit. You spend as much time as you like, as you're enjoying, as it feels good and you're having insights. But just even a half an hour makes a difference for people. Like, if you listen to some of the earlier webinars, I was hoping that a few people who just had beautiful insights, and they all get recorded, and they're on my YouTube channel, or they're on our Facebook group. I post them in the 2 places. So it's just, where they spoke about a before situation and an after situation. And we never talked about the situation, the family situation, like someone who was not happy with her boyfriend's family, who were not helping out with the elderly mother. she had such, so she went from resentment to understanding and compassion. And we never spoke about this on any of the webinars. So things like that, how it translates. Sid speaks very, you might call it esoterically, metaphorically, that he is pointing to something through stories, through metaphors. Yet that translates to our physical reality here. And change occurs from inside out. And once you've had an insight that changes your behavior, first of all, there's no behavior modification here. You're not thinking the change. It's coming from an understanding, right? I mean, the whole world is trying to be better humans and have a nicer life and have a more contented, loving, peaceful life. But they're going about it by collecting information and reading information. That's why I love Sid's materials. They're not informational. It's tricky where you can easily think of it as information, especially mind, thought, and consciousness. We have an understanding of what those words mean, but you want to go beyond the words. Sid said that so much. Go beyond the words. Go beyond the meaning that you have for the words and just hear something new. Hear a new meaning, a new understanding for yourself. And you don't want it to feel like work. If it feels like work, take a break. Go for a walk. Because that just means you're up in your head thinking too much. It's a good signal that lets you know if you're not enjoying it, if it's not peaceful and fun, then Martine just wrote I missed it. But I also want to hear from all of you. So thank you, Martine. Yeah. Is there an order how to read the books? That's a good question. Thank you. I like the order of Second Chance because it was Sid's first book. And then I like the sequel of Second Chance, In Search of the Pearl. So Second Chance and In Search of the Pearl. And on the Mystery School website, I tell people, depending on how it loads for you, it loads for me bottom up. So whenever I put in a new short video, it goes on the top. So after you read the welcome, where there's a description of that, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, which is like September 15, I think, you can start going through it because it stacks like this. And I originally started that to answer questions that people had, but there haven't been many questions so far. So I've used those little short videos to just speak, read something that stood out for me, like a little paragraph, a highlight for me. And anybody can go and make a video for us. It doesn't have to be just me. You're going to get tired of seeing me. Anybody can hop on and make a little video of something that was really wonderful for you to see, an insight you had or whatever. It'd be great to see that. So enough of me. And, I want to make sure Richard has time. If you want, Richard, it's so great because, Richard knew Sid early on. And I don't want to give away your story, but, if you could just speak to all these years later, you see, we don't get older. We just have years pass.
We get better.
Speak to how it's changed for you through all these years, your before and after kind of thing.
I think thanks, Lori. Given the focus is listening, um, there's two kinds, and it's like hearing and listening. And you can come into contact with the essence and not be aware that you are listening. And the penny drops, and that's when you have an insight. And I can't remember how long it was for me, but the first indicator for me that dropped the insight around it was I'm searching. I didn't even know that. So my insight was basically two words that came probably, well, a few weeks probably, and we hadn't even met Sid yet. Two words, I'm okay, which the outside illustration of that insight give you an understanding of how I was prior to that insight was I was top graduate in my high school class for academic technical. I was top graduate in building technology at BCIT, which is the top polytech in British Columbia. But get this, despite that, and it was like it was built in. I didn't have to think about it. It was just built in. Um, one company I was working for, we had, because it was architectural building design with a heavy technology base. And we had to call the building departments, zoning departments to get clarification, interpretation, etc. And before I'd make the call, I'd count to 10. But often I wouldn't make it to 10 and I'd never make the call. So after the insight, I'm okay. And literally the next day, so you want to talk about timing or time, the next day, I had stopped counting. I would just pick up the phone and make the call. And interesting, and it was kind of just this thought, insight, just a word. And like you say, Lori, Sid would often say, don't listen to my words. And ESSA, for example, is all about metaphors, words that, for the most part, are part of the language of the three principles and Sid's experience. And so Rick and I were coming home from a group. So Elsie, other people, Jerry Lee Allen, etc. We were part of a group in Nanaimo. There was one in Salt Spring, one in Victoria, one in Vancouver. They were just getting together to listen, which is a good, because we'd listened to Sid's tapes. And back in those days, he would actually send out, not public, but they weren't private to any one individual. And this was to share. All he did was the cool part about it, and the ripple created from it. All he did was share his experience. And that's all he ever did. What people heard as a result of him sharing that one experience, it just keeps rippling, and it's still rippling. Um, so his sharing was expressed in audio tapes. It was expressed in writings. I had the good fortune of actually helping Sid with three of his books. And in terms of design and layout for um, Second Chance and Quest of the Pearl and Missing Link. And yeah, it's like honored. And again, it's like that recent piece that I wrote on space, time, and matter. Okay, and this will help explain time in particular. Like it's one of these illusionary qualities about the outside. All three of them are, but taking it home, the outside and the inside are exactly the same. There's no difference. So once you connect the dots and get that, a sense of what that is inside, the world changes, because you're looking at a totally different but same world. And that's, again, your mind can just go, wow, what's that? So it's really interesting how we are delivered into the world, and this is the world of form, but we're coming from the formless world. And it's really cool because I've heard the expression that, you come into this world as an expression of love between two physical beings, which is really an extension of their inner being. So, yeah, it was just like, so I had this just thought, if you want to call it, insight, you could call it whatever, doesn't matter what the word is, inspiration to live my life different. And literally the split second later, I turned to Marika, we're driving home in the car. I turned to Marika and say, I'm okay. And she goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, I just realized I'm okay. It wasn't that something unique happened at the gathering, it just popped. And like you can't predict when those moments are, like Sid, for example. Like he was just looking for a slightly better life, but boom, his experience lands on his inner self, and it just totally opens up his experience. So immediately so we got through that brief explanation. Immediately after that, I said, you know what I want to do tomorrow? When I go to work, I want to give notice to my employer and start my own business. And she went, why would you want to do that? You have no clients and no business experience. And I just said, it'll be okay, because I know it's okay. And literally, so we were 20 minutes drive, and I'll get through this little bit because it explains the magic, the mystery rolling out. We don't have any control of it if we just let it roll. And once we discover how to let it roll. So I drive Marika into her work. I'm another 10 minutes beyond, because I was the taxi in the mornings and evenings. So I set up a meeting with my employer, and we go, we go through the meeting, and they're disappointed I wanted to leave. And I had to negotiate the purchase of a track drafter, which is a tool for drafting. And because that was the business I wanted to continue with, and design and drawings for buildings. And I didn't limit it to residential, because that's what the limit was with this employer. So we stood up, meeting was done, and we shook hands, but he wouldn't let go of my hand. And yeah, it was really interesting. And he says, we've got our real estate consultant here today, and we're at the front end of some new work, and we'd like to bring him in and chat, join the chat. And so after that, 15 minutes later, we stood up again, shook hands, and this time he didn't hang on to my hand, but I had a client in 3 projects. So that was a lesson in that of no expectations. And I mean, life is free when your inner self operates from that space. And my mantra now is no rush, no expectations. Do it when you're inspired. It'll be obvious.
Yeah.
And not obvious on the outside. It becomes plainly obvious to your inner self. And once you start to understand, or just simply get it, as far as the difference between inside out and outside in. That's what it was. Because where did my capacity to learn, to be good at what I was doing? There's another word, metaphor, which I love, intuition. Found one definition that just resonated with me. No prior knowledge. So you don't need any prior knowledge. You don't need any prior experience, regardless of what you're doing. You could be talking about something. You could be, like me, creating something, like I do graphic design work and marketing and all that stuff. But you need no prior experience, no prior knowledge. So you can just sit down, and my training, for example, this was one of the things that I loved when I was training in computers. And this was creatively. So I was training pre-pressed apartments to convert from manual, Ruby, which is a layered plastic and knife and pen and ink and all cameras and all that stuff, to all it's done in the computer. So my preface at the beginning of the training sessions, they would go for 6 or 7 weeks, was that despite all the technical details that we're going to talk about, hands-on work on, etc., if there's one thing I can get you, or you can get as a result of the training that we were going through, was to be able to sit down at a computer and just do it. Not think it through, just do it. Because what's interesting is I computerized in 87. By 88, I was the first authorized training consultant in British Columbia. And again, no thought, just straight sit down and do it. I actually wrote my own manuals for the training sessions, and I do them like the week prior to the session that was coming. The only reason I did that is I wanted to share my approach to how I use my computer, how I use the programs, so that when they went into a user's manual, the language was the same. That's all. And they had a takeaway. So really interesting. So, I mean, this idea of being intuitive, and I discovered that definition when I was helping a dear friend doing what I do, computer graphic work. And we were 2:30 in the morning. We were finishing up for a banquet and a fundraising dinner for a fly fishing federation. And he's sitting behind me and he's watching, because he's, this is real time development, comment, approval, etc. And he says, "How do you know how to do this stuff?" So I said, "Well, I'm an intuitive person." So, well, what does that mean? So we look it up. And it's amazing how you uncover these nuggets. And that was one of them. No prior knowledge, because we innately are built that way. We don't need prior knowledge, prior experience to do what we're capable of doing. So that's what we have right there for us to apply. And again, I'm going to use a metaphor in our day-to-day experience, because what is a day? It's 24 hours, it's X number of minutes. Well, that's an illusion. What's at the heart and soul of that is the experience that we get out of. I shared with you that comment about, like, we might have an experience, and I was going to send you an update, because it's not that we're waiting for it. We have it. It can feel like forever, or it can feel like a blink of an eye. Same thing. And we're all different. So what one soul might experience as done immediately, again, that's a word for time-based. Well, it's an illusion. or it'll never happen at all because it just takes forever. One of the things I love that was, for me, I still apply this in my, my personal life, my business, is infinity. Because Sid would talk about that. And again, that's just another metaphor for no beginning, no end. It's so deep, so broad that, again, the word lifetime, what is that? It's like, because form and formlessness are the same. So you're while you're here in the physical plane, you're constantly moving back and forth between those two realms, but you're not actually moving. You're not going anywhere because they're the same. And that's, again, something that Sid shared about his experience. I met him in late 75, but it was kind of, I think, early 76 that my I'm okay insight came. And I love the word insight. You break it apart, it's a sight from within. So that's where it all comes from.
That was so interesting to hear. That's a lot. I didn't hear all of that in the past, Richard. I don't know if you know that Richard's involved in creating a wonderful digital book. Incredible photographs. So is this your photograph?
Yeah. No.
In
No.
Quest of the
For
Pearl?
Sid's books, those would have been his, wherever they came from.
Oh,
One of the
it looked
very,
like
very
one of
first,
yours.
well, one of the very, very first drafts of Second Chance, I think, I created a mock-up. Well, and this is in my early years, so crude, and because I kind of officially changed my career focus from architectural building technology, design, etc. From that to graphic design. I had a 4-year plan. It was done in 2. So, and that's the last plan I ever created. Because going back to, thinking about where you want to go, planning where you want to go, no, don't need to. So I met Sid in 76, and that's when he just tapped me on the shoulder, and like, there's something that he shares about waking up, and that's another awaken. That's another metaphor of an experience that he had with Chip and Jan. And they were somewhere with friends, I believe, on Salt Spring. And Chip and Jan, we were at a beach somewhere enjoying a fire. And Chip and Jan went down the beach because they wanted to have some quiet time, during the visit. And they're sitting alone on a log down the beach, and they hear a noise behind them, and it's Sid. He came down to, and this is one of the things that I'm not sure how I came across this, but this is a true story, true experience. And so Sid comes up to Chip and he says, "So you want to teach this, eh?" And Chip hadn't said anything like that. So when you look at what Sid's level of consciousness would open him up to an understanding without saying or listening, it was just a fact. Chip's kind of taken aback, and what's Chip doing? I mean, he was one of my mentors early on. He worked for me, actually. He and Ken. I had a architectural design technology company on Salt Spring back. We lived on Salt Spring probably late 76, or early 77 to 1980. And they weren't trained up in what they were doing for me. Chip had no training in drafting, but he was there for different purposes. And, telling stories at lunch. So you just, however you share it is a way of transference. It doesn't matter what it is. Ken was my clerk of works, so he was handling the physical realization of projects for, when they're getting built. And Chip was helping me with drafting because I couldn't do all the load myself. And there were times where Chip would say, Richard, go home. We'll take care of everything here. Just go home. And, I was just slightly out of sorts and needed to go home. And I love that's another expression which Sid used, going home. Again, it's not necessarily it's not necessarily a physical direction. It's just a metaphor for realizing true self. Go home. And I was so pleased when Dickon and Natasha's book came out, Coming Home, which is looking at it different angle, but coming and going, same thing. And home is is one spirit coming alive, and or going home, coming home. That's more the action, but home is the spirit, your soul. And that book you mentioned, like H is for home, and Natasha has already, provided some input, and Dickon haven't quite, because Dickon, I asked, would he write the book? And when I was en route coming home from Las Vegas in October 2016, so November 2016, was that when you and I met?
The school in 2016, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, that's
on the
when.
Ferry.
So Essa was being birthed, like literally on the way home from Las Vegas.
Oh,
I was
wow.
in Las Vegas less than 24 hours, and I drove down to Portland because I had a friend, artist, client, wasn't really a paying client, just incredible artist who, her focus now is colored pencils, doing angling related art. Blow your mind. So I stopped at her place. So whatever time it took from Vancouver, Washington, which is very close to Portland, the time it took to drive home, these insights were just popping as far as what is become now Essa. So really interesting.
That's the digital book I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the intent to go digital is that, well, it's formless. So again, it's an example of what the true nature is. One of the insights I've had about form and allowing it to continually evolve is that there's no end point. And that's what life is. I have another expression, Zed and beyond. And that's what I use for me in terms of how we function, think, whatever. If you want to get to infinity, that point in infinity, again, there's no end point, but an infinity is just an expression that describes that concept. Z, A to Z, we all understand A to Z because that's part of our physical realm, but and beyond with no end point. So that symbol of infinity represents no end point, but it also represents no beginning. So the infinity symbol works two ways on the timeline: before you came to the physical world, after you leave it. And
I just read maybe a day or so ago, a really great couple of sentences about what you're speaking to on Instagram.
Yeah.
And it said something to the effect of, most people think that we are humans having a spiritual experience, but really we're spirit having a human experience.
I love that.
Isn't that great? You know, that's the inside out understanding of life that shifts people into a whole new direction that, you know, is also more positive, more loving, and more compassionate. How does that happen? You can't try to be those things. You know, another point is Chip. You mentioned Chip Chipman, such a funny name. I love that name.
There's
That
two of them, you know.
there's more than one Chip Chipman.
His older brother, Chip, he's actually Bill. And they have this very, very friendly, humorous dialogue. Well, I'm really the real Chip. Anyway, carry on.
But you know what I love is that he was so resistant to, it was Jan who
Yeah.
heard what Sid was expressing first, Chip's wife, Jan. And it's in The Secret of Love, their story about how resistant he was. Like, how can you tell me that our problems are all thought? That is crazy. And something happened. She just couldn't help what she saw. So it made no sense for her to keep fighting, keep these arguments that they would have going. And at some point, he was hit like, holy cow, it is all thought.
Yeah.
You know, but you can't tell somebody that. You can't repeat it to yourself and have it make a difference. It's something you come to, it's something you see as an insight. And there's just something about reading and listening to Sid that happens to stimulate insights for people. It's because he had these huge experience. And like you said, Richard, he is sharing what he saw. He does stories and metaphors, but it's always sharing what he saw. He can't share anything else. I mean, when you see something so huge, what else are you going to share? What else is there? That's everything. It's everything when people can see it. And, you know, if the little brain, for anybody listening to this recording, or anybody on with me now, you know, if the little brain says, well, how come other people are seeing more than I am? That's the typical ego brain thought wave nonsense that happens for all of us. I do it to this day. You know, I can get caught up looking on Facebook or looking on Instagram and wondering, well, wait, I've been at this 6 months and this person's only been at it 1 month and they've got 500 more followers. Then, you know, I see my brain doing nonsense, stuff like that. And, you know, it's good to be able to laugh at it. It's really good to have a chuckle, like none of that matters. None of it matters. The only thing that matters is the stuff we think that matters, and that's thought. And that's not coming to us any other place but our own made up thinking about what's right and true and fair and all of that here on this physical plane. And we all get caught up. I'm sure you do, Richard. I know even Sid would get caught up in human ego thinking.
Well, it's this.
Da-da-da-da.
One of the
But
cool
I'll tell you
things-
what, when you simultaneously know that this is your experience because right now, because you're caught up in a bunch of thinking, it doesn't make the thinking vanish. It doesn't make your experience shift like that, but it gives you an edge over it. Like you just have this knowing, I know what this is and I'm falling for it, but I'm not falling head over tail for it. You know, I know that it's just a moment of falling for nonsense, even though you're feeling that awful thought. So we're running over a little bit, but I just want the two of you who are still, we got a message that people had to leave to have lunch, but, or calls. Somebody said they had a bunch of calls and, so what questions do you have, Pallavi, or, and if I'm mispronouncing your name, let me know.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't have any questions right now. What do you mean by questions? Like for the group, what we're doing?
Yeah, questions,
Yeah.
comments, anything. I just want to leave a little time for Q&A at the end. Anything?
Okay. I guess I don't really have questions right now. I'm looking forward to the material we're going through. I'm just not sure. Like, do we just listen to any sit stuff like every day for half an hour at least, or are we supposed to listen to something special?
Yeah, there's no other requirement, just a half an hour, spend a half an hour with Sid.
Yeah.
Like, it was so great hearing Richard. I didn't know that you had these groups who would just get together and listen to tapes,
Yeah.
old Sid tapes. So Martine had to leave. Yeah. But
I loved what Richard said about listening and this deeper listening. I started listening to Sid a few months ago, but I still am dealing with some chronic pain, so I'm often lie down during the day 1 or 2 times, and I always use that time to listen to an old talk by Sid, and I just love listening to them, and I often get stuck on one and listen to it like for weeks because there's always something new in there. And yeah, so that's why I was excited about your post about this group, because I thought it's a very nice idea to go back to
yeah,
that. Yeah,
I love the idea of doing it as a group because we keep each other going. Otherwise, it's easy to forget. You listen to a little of Sid and then you get caught up listening to all the other people out in the world talking about what they found. I just find that Sid just stirs my insights more than anybody else I've ever run across.
I've been in other spiritual things or searching in a way like for 25 years, I guess. I think I read the first books when I was 16 or something, and it helped me, and I found good stuff, and I've been with Osho for years, and I don't know, all kinds of stuff. But the funny thing is that I feel since I started learning about the 3P, Hannah introduced me to the 3 principles at the beginning of the year, and it's like it just gets way more practical and more of an experience. Like I feel like before it was a lot of intellectual understanding and trying to get there. And like very early on when I worked with Hannah, something shifted in me that I felt like I finally understood the looking inside bit. that it doesn't mean looking to my stories or my old experiences or whatever. Like I got a feeling for this, that answers or wisdom really come from my own inside, and that people or the outside can only point me to it, but it really has to come from my inside. And I also noticed that it's really not possible to express it. Like when I see something true for me, like I can talk about it, but it won't feel the same way for somebody else. And it's kind of interesting. That was very big shift for me to maybe to just I don't think I never had an insight before, but I kind of didn't notice or didn't understand that it really came from this quiet space inside. And yeah, so
Right.
I'm very excited about the learning about all of it.
Yeah, it's so great. It's great having you on board with us. And yeah, really nice description about insight. Thanks, Pallavi.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you're in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And your accent doesn't seem like it's a German accent. It's lovely.
Oh, thank you. I think it has gotten a bit better during this year because I talked so much with Hannah and on webinars, and I'm reading and listening everything in English. So it's gotten really a bit better. Like when I heard myself on the first recording, it sounded so German. I was really freaked out about it. Like on the first webinar I did when I saw the recording. Now it's getting a bit better.
I love foreign accents. Yeah.
My wife is German Hungarian.
Oh
That's
yeah,
her roots. Or Romanian Hungarian.
yeah, yeah.
But she, not a pinch of accent. But you know, you talk to like even her mother, you know, but Geza, her dad, you know, just was not able to leave his Hungarian accent.
Mm.
But so cool. There's a photograph of him that I love. He was like this wild Hungarian. He was playing his mandolin. And he was wearing, you know, he was just the way he was costumed, if you want to call it, or his character that was bursting forth. Uh, pretty amazing.
And Teresa, I wanna, did I say that right, Teresa?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, you did. I wanted to mention two things. So funny enough, since yesterday, after I had a dream, I keep getting this. I don't need to have. I don't have to do anything, and every time I get a bit anxious, I can like calm myself down again with this. I don't have to do anything, and I realized that when I stop doing the things I think I should do, then the things I actually want to do seem to come up. But what I struggled today with, I just started a new job as a mental health support worker, and I have to do certain courses and certificates. And I had to do one about childhood abuse. And I'm sitting there and I'm really struggling because it's not one of these courses where you just read and you tick boxes. And it's like you have to stop the video, it's 3 videos, and then you have to really think about and make notes. And because I've experienced a lot of abuse in my childhood, it was really traumatic. And I've worked through so much, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, yes, all thought, and Sid said we shouldn't go back in the past. But while I'm working through this course, I'm getting the memories, and my body has a physical memory as well. And I'm really struggling because I know that what my parents did to me is proper abuse, and they would end up in prison for it these days. And my dad is 83, my mom is 76, and they either can't remember, my mom cannot remember the beatings, and my dad is just like, we did our best, and gets quite aggressive. I don't try to talk to them. I don't need to talk to them anymore. I have done so much healing. But when I'm confronted with such information and I have to work through it because as a requirement, I still struggle. And the knowledge, oh, it's all thought, doesn't really help in that minute. And I think if someone would say to me, well, it's all thought, I think I would slap them.
Right, off with the head with anybody who would say that, right?
Yeah. So I wonder if that will ever change or how that
Yeah,
the knowledge of Sid.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, because people are really lost. People are lost in the world, and they truly think that, you know, capital punishment is a good thing, or that you have to be really aggressive with your children to teach them because of how they were taught. I missed what class this is that you're taking
Oh,
that's causing you to go into your past.
well, it's called, it's a safeguarding course. Safeguarding is an online introduction course for safeguarding children or working together, safeguarding children and young people. So it's a government course. And if you work in, I'm working as a mental health support worker now. And the funny thing is, I got this job and I'm actually starting to coach people now. So I can use, without telling them about Sid, I can tell them about, I'm there to support them with their thinking and their mental health and everything. But as a requirement, I need to go through the whole course and answer a few questions, get a certificate, and you tick the box.
So you're in the role of like a social worker
Yeah, that
of
mental health
sorts,
support worker
right?
is
Beautiful.
social
You
work.
know, because you have such understanding for what some kids go through to this day. Unless you've been through it, it's really hard to imagine when you hear some really terrible, awful stories. And look at where you are today. Look at how resilient people are going through what you went through, and you're in a good life. You're having a good life. Your health, your innate health survived all of that and thrived. I'd say more than survived. I would say thrive. Look at the position you're in now.
I know, it's actually amazing because I'm cured of chronic depression and general anxiety, and I have chronic pain as well. So I'm disabled and I use a wheelchair and I'm in bed all day. I work from my bed. But that's not really, I don't see that as a problem. That's not, it's just, I believe I'm a very healthy person and I happen to have these issues. But I still don't get how I cannot be triggered by description of abuse if it's all thought, you know? And I have worked through my childhood trauma. So they just seem the idea, well, Sid says, don't go into the past, it's all gone. But sometimes you're confronted with it. I don't choose to go into the past. But
Right.
then the workplace says, oh, you have to do this course. And I'm sitting there hours reading about abuse, you know, and then to think, I really thought about it. I really thought about Sid today and, oh, it's all thought. And why am I really struggled with that course. I really have to tell you, I really struggled.
Well, you're going to see more and more and more. You know, don't put any pressure on yourself. But Sid has, in the missing link, he has a chapter on forgiveness that I think is just so beautiful. That you don't forgive the act, but you, as I understand what I read in the missing link, is that you can forgive the person because they were clueless. They were what we call psychologically innocent because they had no clue what they were doing was not only bad for you, but bad for them. They lost their daughter as a result.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. You know.
Yeah.
So, but at the time, they thought, you know, that expression that you hear a lot is that people do the best they can given the level of consciousness they're at when they're doing what they're doing, given how they see the world.
Yeah.
Given the mind that they have to be in. I mean, I feel as sorry for the person who's the abuser. There's a wonderful, I know this story because we edited this book so many times, in The Secret of Love. There's a story about a man who went to see, I can't remember the name of I'm blocking on the name of the counselor. It'll come to me. Anyway, this fellow went to see him. He was an abusive husband. And he just got really, really quiet. Do you know who that is? Joe, not Joe Bailey. Anyway, Joe, I remembered his first name. Joe said, it just came to him out of the blue. He said, you feel much worse about yourself than even your parole officer. And the guy burst out crying. He said, how did you know?
So the understanding of the other person is then the letting go of the anger and the triggering.
Yeah, but it's not a letting go like making yourself do it.
No.
It's a letting go that happens with understanding.
Yeah.
You know, it happens or it doesn't happen. It happens when it happens. It's nothing that you can make happen, because that would be outside in trying to make something happen. But with more understanding, it's like that woman I was talking about at the beginning, who all of a sudden was feeling compassion for her soon-to-be sister-in-law. Once they're married, she'll be a sister-in-law. All of a sudden, she's filled with compassion, like this woman, the sister-in-law couldn't handle being around the elderly mother. And that's why she wasn't helping out more. That thought never occurred to her, as long as she was so resentful. Why are they not coming to help us out and give us a break? Nobody could tell her, you ought to think this way. It would be good for your heart if you think this way. Yeah, right. And like you said, off with the head. It's just thought. No, that really happened. But it's when we're thinking about it that we're being affected by it. There's much of your life you're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
The example I like to use about this is when 9/11 happened. That very same day, I mean, we were all horror-stricken and looking at the TV, but that very same day, I would find myself in a joke with somebody, and then all of a sudden, like, oh my God, how could I be laughing? 9/11 happened. Well, 9/11 wasn't in my head at the moment I was laughing at that joke. That was totally unrelated. All in the same day.
I feel I recover quicker. I don't feel like traumatized by that course. It was just like while I was doing it, it was difficult, but yeah. All right. Yeah, so it's part of our habits, our conditioning. This is how I always reacted to things, and I'm still, and again, then it overrides or is being overridden by the thing, I don't have to do anything, or by the thought, I don't have to do anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. That is,
yeah. You just had an insight, I would say, right? Didn't that seem like an insight, Richard? When Teresa said, I'm not affected by that anymore. But it was sure difficult when I was forced to think about it.
Yeah.
And being forced to think about it didn't heal you, didn't.
That's what I thought. I spent years in talking therapy, and I thought, oh my God, people are being re-traumatized and re-traumatized and re-traumatized. And I do grief recovery. This is the banner behind, and we go through a loss history graph and a relationship graph, but you become complete at the end. It's like 8 sessions, and in the end you have learned things, and it's really healing. And for me it works very nicely with the 3P. And I know there are standalone schools of thoughts or methods, but they as well, they go beyond. If you just complain, if you just talk about it, nothing will ever change. And both methods have been absolutely life-changing for me.
What was life-changing for you?
Both methods, to use the grief recovery and learning about the 3Ps and using them has already been life-changing. So I'm just really excited how it will change over the next 6 weeks.
So that group, grief recovery, also recognizes that going back into the past and reliving it is not helpful.
Yeah. So it's about not just complaining. It's just you take one relationship, you look at it, you work with the tools they teach, and then it's finished. You work and then you can move on. And where talking therapy, you can sit for years and just talk about the same thing and the same thing, and you just re-traumatize yourself, and it didn't do anything for me.
Right. That's huge to see that. And it's also the evolution of a field. It's the evolution of psychology that, all those psychologists who believed and were taught and did what they were taught to bring people into the past, they did what they thought was best, just like your parents did what they thought was best. And that's, the psychological innocence that people are doing the best they can, given how it looks to them. if you've run across Judy Sedgman and Christine Heath, they have a podcast out, just came out, called Psychology Had It Backwards. And it's all about that. And I was in 4 years of Jungian analysis, which I thought, oh, that's sexy. I was living in San Francisco 4 years. And, honestly, I came out just as depressed as I was before. And a year later, I met Sid Banks and my whole world changed. And it was very similar to what Richard, how you said, I'm okay. It was a very similar kind of insight. I felt like the relief of the world was off my shoulders. Like, I'm not in charge of making the right things happen in my life. Something like that. It's hard to really wrap your mind around what it was, but it was a huge relief that, and basically the same thing. I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. Things aren't going to turn out the way I think they should, but I'm still okay.
One of the things that Sid talked about, and it was actually when he said to Chip, so you want to teach this, eh? Was he said, since his experience, and this would have been very shortly thereafter, that the pleasure that he was getting just because of, he said to Chip, there's no greater pleasure than tapping somebody on the shoulder and waking them up. And, in the sense of a true spiritual awakening, because he said a lot of people don't know they live life, but they don't know they're asleep.
Yeah.
I found a nugget.
Oh.
This is 1981.
That was I don't remember
Okay,
that.
no, this
cover.
was pre-first edition, and it's quite a bit smaller than, so this was my level of skill. This was the first printing.
That I remember. I don't have that copy, but that was the book I remember. That was the first one.
Conceptually, the picture you see there is that
Oh,
one.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
this was
And now it changed
1983.
again.
Yeah, 1983.
Similar, but
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's Mama Leela's house.
Oh.
That was my impression of what would work for a cover.
I thought maybe you were going to say it was where Sid was living. No.
No, that was based on what was in the book. That was kind of just that insight that came to me as what visual would work great here.
In Germany, we have a real problem getting the books. Like, I can only get them on Kindle. It's very hard to get any paperbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that they're behind in printing them, getting them printed. Yeah. Well, thank heavens we can get them digitally, right? And also, I think they're an audio. I'm not sure on iTunes. They are an audio.
They should be. I mean, like, it doesn't matter what form it takes to make the connection. Really, is it's kind of the message that people should be understanding. It's what's shared in the writings is a level of consciousness that explains reality, explains a whole bunch of things.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And when Richard, when you were talking, I was thinking about Teresa being in your position now with what you're learning to be, all the lives that you will touch as a result, and how your colleagues are going to see the change in the people you work with without bringing them into the past.
That is I thought, how on earth is that possible? I became so ill last year. I had to stop working as a nursery nurse. And then I just brought all my knowledge and experience together. I have a teaching qualification. I did the grief recovery and everything. And I applied for this mental health support worker job. And Corona, everybody's losing their jobs, and I got a part-time job I can do. And then I thought, I'm going to coach people. I have so much freedom. There is no script what I have to talk to them about. I just have to listen and talk to them. And it was absolutely amazing. And even my nursery nurse experience, I was able to talk to someone today who has a little child and did a bit something or wasn't really right. And I didn't just have an opinion, I had like an educated opinion. And I thought, this way she can listen to me because she feels there is someone with proper background and not someone who just read a book or so. And before I struggled as well. I thought, how do I share this with people? And then I just realized I don't have to mention sit or anything. It's more about the experience of listening and then just saying something, and they feel different.
Absolutely. You just let wisdom guide you. That's what it is, that quiet voice, and listening without judgment, without trying to change their mind, without, it's phenomenal to be able to be heard without the person you're speaking to trying to change your mind or say it's going to be okay or something really superficial, to really be there with your clients, knowing that what they went through. Whew.
But you see, I had to become so ill because I had to learn how patronizing that is. People always telling me, eat healthy, do exercise, do this, do that. And it annoyed me so much, but I think I probably was guilty of that before. Every time I found a shiny solution, I would like, oh, you have to try this out. This is really amazing. And because for months now, I have experienced how patronizing that is. I'm like, I don't know anything. What do I know? I don't know what's right for you, because I experienced myself that people constantly try to tell me what to do. So I'm healed. And it just doesn't work for me. And I needed to hear this because otherwise I wouldn't have learned. So for me, becoming ill was a real blessing. And I had to stop the nursery work. And now I'm doing something what I'm really passionate about. It's amazing.
You're not kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It really is amazing. And nobody needs to be healed.
We're healthy.
Right?
Already.
Right?
We're already healthy. I'm already healthy.
I mean, I love, that saying that the Pettits have on their website, something like nothing broken, never lacking, nothing lacking,
Nothing
never broken.
nothing lacking. So it's just an
When
illusion.
you see that in the moment, that's where life is, in this moment now. It's not what happened to us in the past. Wow. So we're an hour and a half. It's been so great with just a small group of us. I've enjoyed this so much. I'm so glad you all showed up. And any last words you want to say before we call it a day and go and have a nice rest of it?
Just thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you all for coming. And I'll see you next week, same time. Hopefully you can make it, but I'll put the recording in our Facebook group and on YouTube for anybody who, there are a few people in our group who don't do Facebook. So it's in YouTube also. Wonderful. Okay, lovies. Mwah.
Have a nice evening.
Yeah, you too, everybody. Bye-bye now. Let me
Bye-bye.
just stop the recording.